And a lot of people, Rav Yasher, they said that, what? That you can, the get's there, okay, even if the husband didn't appoint another person to be a shliach, he's appointed person X passed away, person Y can act as a shliach. How does that work? Because what? The husband, okay, Zach and Madam Shabafanav. You can act on the husband's behalf. What? Now you're going to ask, what's he getting out of it? He's behind the iron curtain. He's in the middle of nowhere. Is it really a schus for him? Okay, but this is what the base is. This is what the base did. This is what the base did argued. All right, next. The Igros Moshe. I'm a little bit oversimplifying, but that's the basic point. Okay, the Igros Moshe had a case. Her husband was banished to Siberia by the Soviets, and he appointed a certain a Rav to write again and deliver again to his wife. Right? And what happened? And the rabbi died. Oh no! What a disaster! How are you gonna get? You can't get to him in Siberia. Where? Who knows where he is? So what do you do in this case? So believe it or not, Rav Moshe, that's what Rabbi Klapper, when you posted, I saw you posted that tshuva. It's an unbelievable tshuva. He says that the base did that has that authorization document in their hand can write the get on behalf of that rabbi who was appointed, even though he's no longer alive. They can act as his shliach. That's really something. You can act. That's an unbelievable chiddush of Rav Moshe. You can act on behalf not only of someone who's incompetent. You can act on behalf of somebody who's not even alive. That's really something. I mean, that's what we get with Yisker. We're giving stuck on behalf of the people who are no longer alive. Okay, that's unbelievable chiddush. And here in C, the Chavatzel's Hasharon, he shouldn't be. Many of you may not have heard of him, but he was a very important posek in pre-war Galicia, and he had a case where wife's far away from husband. The husband was a very difficult person. He's a high-ranking figure in the Communist Party. They finally got him to get a get after terrible difficulty. Right? They wrote the get. They delivered the get to the wife's city. Guess what happens? Oh no! The get was lost in the mail. Oh no! Oh, it's terrible. So what do you do? So the Chavatzel Hasharon writes that you can actually write and deliver the get on behalf of the husband. So that's a step even further than the Chayfa get. The Chayfa get, they delivered the get on behalf of the husband. Here they even wrote a new get and delivered the get on behalf of the husband, Zachal Alam Shalbafanam. And you could argue, what schus is it for this communist dude to want to divorce? Right? This is not something that it's not something that it seems that he values very, very much. But nonetheless, this is the ruling of the Chavatzel Hasharon. The Har Tzvi also has this concept. Now, where do you have this idea of writing and delivering a get on behalf of a husband, even if the husband never authorized the writing of the get, such as in our case in Tzfat, where the husband is in PVS state. So here you have another tshuva of the Har Tzvi, and other Achronim say this as well. That, and again, you're going to say it's a secondary reason. You're right, it's a secondary, but two secondary reasons we're combining together. Plus the Tzfat case is a stronger case. So so we see the Har Tzvi already allowed in his case that the basin can write a get on behalf of a husband. It's speaking about a case where there were many other reasons to say that the marriage was not valid. It could be a good argument in the Har Tzvi's case. This is in Siman Tzadi Ches. Was a very good possibility the husband wasn't Jewish. His conversion wasn't valid. And he just writes a secondary condition that you can write a get on behalf of the husband. It's the argument that the Tzfat Beit Din says you can write on behalf of the husband. It's a schus for him. It's a schus. He's doing a good thing for his wife. It's good for his neshama. It's a benefit. And here's the point. You'll say, well, it's a downside for him. He's losing a wife. So that's why the Beis Din appointed an executor, an apotropos, to make sure that to advocate for this man. Is there any downside? And the executor, on behalf of the husbands in the PVS state, said there's no downside. So I'm saying the process was a very fair process. Now, what's very, very quickly, because I'm running out of time, the criticism of the Tzfat decision. So, gives her the basic points of the criticism. So you have Rosh Sternbach. Rosh Sternbach makes the argument, is a very big posik in Yerushalayim, and he argues it's not a schot because a husband, right, would want to have his wife attending to him. It's helpful. The wife goes to the hospital, make sure his needs are met. So Rav Lavi answered, well, there's no difference. He's permanent vegetative state. The hospital's taking care of him. By law, they're required to take care of him. It's not going to be any difference whether she's married or not. He'll lose no quality of life. He'll gain nothing from the wife attending to his needs. He loses nothing by not having a wife that's tending to his needs. So that's the argument. Does he benefit or does he not benefit? And I'll just go Rav Farbstein, who's the Rosh Yeshiva of Hebron. His argument was, well, how come, if the Tzvat Beit is right, how come there's no precedent for this? How do you have silence? And the Mishnah and the Rishon are utterly silent. And how come here the Mishnah just says, Nischarish nishtata, eno motzi alamis. There's no precedent in the Gemara or the Rishonim for such an idea of writing a get on behalf of a husband who's an extreme, we'll call it an extreme shota. So it's an argument from silence, and of course every argument from silence is arguable. So that's the hearts, because what does the Tzvat Beit Din respond? They said, why is the Mishnah silent? It doesn't address the situation because it's not something that existed in the time of the Mishnah. It's a phenomenon that only technology created, a problem technology created, and therefore the Mishnah and the Rishon didn't address it because it wasn't an issue that was a live issue at the time of the Mishnah and Rishon were written. Okay, so where do we go from this? Bottom line. Okay, I'll just give you a little bit of analogy to help understand this. I'll leave you with this. We'll take some questions. And of course, you're welcome to email me if you want to discuss further. I plan on writing this up a little bit more in detail. God willing, we'll send it to Rabbi Clapper, and we'll send it out to everybody who is interested. I'll give you the following analogy. God willing, for those of us who are married and those who are eventually married, you'll have the following experience. Your spouse will drive. Okay, now you're sitting there in the front seat. You're watching your spouse drive, and what are you going to do? Why'd you do that? What's the matter with you, right? So, how'd you do this? What? Okay. So, but it's interesting, right? Now, what does a wise spouse respond? Right? Maybe the wise spouse just lets it go, okay? Or the wise spouse responds. But when you drive, you do the exact same thing. In other words, so what's the analogy over here? It's very nice when you're not in the driver's seat and you're criticizing, right? But I want to emphasize this again about the Tzvat Beit Din. The process was a fair process. The Tzvat Beit Din wasn't looking for this case. This woman happens to be in their area of jurisdiction. She came to them for help. That's where she could go. She had no eye in the Israeli system, by Israeli law, even by the government law. This is where she had to go. This is not Rav the Tzvat Beit Din, didn't have anything better to do, so they want some publicity. This is what they went. This was their responsibility. And when you're and you just see things in a little bit different light when you're in the driver's seat than when you're on the side, being a backseat driver and saying what a lousy driver you are. So now I know this. Now I'm a Masader Gittin, active Masader Gittin for the last 20 years with God's help. And you understand, when there's somebody comes to you, there's a responsibility, and the responsibility is on you, right? So what I'm just trying to come across with this. I know here you can criticize it. Many of you have already come with the criticisms that Rosh Sternbach and Rav Farbstein have articulated against the right. But you have to give at least the respect that the process that the tzvat beitin, whether you agree with it or not, the process was done in a fair process, right? Full disclosure, there's transparency, it was done deliberately, it was done with fairness to both sides. They appointed an executor to look on behalf of the husband. He wasn't railroaded, he wasn't treated unfairly, and I think that's the way that we should look at the case. Okay. Okay, I think 2 comments, then we'll call it a night. And if you want to talk to me further privately, that's I'm happy to do so. Yes.
So I guess I won't push you on what you would do.
Now, I knew someone was going to ask me that. What would I do?
If the woman came to you for Seder Kedusha, now what would you do?
If this woman came to me for Seder Kedusha, I would ask you.
So the second thing is, this is a preview, because I have a lot of time blocked out in the spring semester to work this out. But I want to try like a first attempt to explain what I think is really going on in Jachter, which will answer Yehuda's question. The difference between a Jachter and Mekach Tos. So one thing you're right is that a Mekach Tos is a condition that arises that was there before the marriage, and a Jachter is a condition that can arise after the marriage.
Okay.
That's a given.
Okay.
Right.
So it's not Mekach Tos.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a given, but here's I think there's a trickier thing going on here. This is my first try at explaining it in public. So a Mekach Tos is when we have something that we're saying, no matter what you did, I would never have agreed to this. Right? Or you deceived me, so we never actually had an agreement. Right? Mekach Tos is because of a mismatch between the two sides. Right? I thought we were entering this deal. It turns out we were entering a different deal. I would never have entered the deal if I had known this. Right? That's a Mekach Tos. Right? If I had known that you were a Baal Mum, I would never have married you. If I had known that you were... Okay, Jachter is a different thing. And Jachter says that, right, recognizes there are all sorts of reasons I would never marry you. Right? All sorts of conditions I would set on our marriage. Right? Two people get together to marry. There are all sorts of reasons that there are things I would say, if this is true of you, I would never marry you. All sorts of things. The only thing is that I don't want you to be able to say that about me. Right? So I can say, like, I'm not going to marry you if it turns out that you don't put away your clothing. Right? I'd never marry you to put away your clothing. Yeah, but you're going to find out something you're equally bad about me that you never wash your dishes. Right? So marriage is a trait, right? So all of us are mochel.
Right.
Our conditions, because we want the marriage to be binding the other way.
Right.
Okay, now, here's the thing. So the first thing is, and this is why Mumar is easier than the husband. I don't care, right? You can have any conditions about whether you marry my brother-in-law or not, marry my brother or not. I don't care. So women can make, right? So the argument that says that the reason you can complain about right, it's straightforward. The Maranam has the Halamin of the Maskana that you can get a woman out of she's not saying Yavama Mukashrin, but if her husband becomes a Mukashrin, no one thinks that she doesn't need to get.
Right.
So you have to say that a Yavam is actually, that you can say this argument about a Yavam when you can't make it about the husband. The argument is that the husband will say, right, that the wife doesn't want the husband to be able to not support her if she becomes Mukashrin. She wants her Ktuba. So the question of whether to marry Mukashrin, of whether it's a Mukashrin, that's a trade-off. But the Yibum, the husband doesn't care if she marries his brother as a Mukashrin. So therefore she can have in her mind that tonight, our marriage is invalid if, after your death, your brother is a Mukashrin, because he doesn't care. So he would let her, right, that's a condition. If she had said it explicitly, he would have said, sure, I marry you all tonight that you don't have to marry my brother if he's a Mukashrin. Okay, now by Shota, this is the argument that the Tzvat Bezin brings from the Mumkasher. By Shota, if the wife said to the husband, you know what, if you become a Shota, then our marriage is invalid. And he says to her, okay, if you become a Shota, I don't have to pay your Ktuba. So she would never make that condition. Right? She would never, right? But if you could construct a circumstance, this is the argument, you construct a circumstance where, A, there's no emotional benefit to be gained from the marriage, and all the practical things of the Ktuba are covered anyway. Right? So that the wife would agree in advance. We're not married if you become a vegetable and you have state support, right? And you have state support for all your medical needs, because there's no emotional support all, it's just practical. So I agree that if I become a vegetable, and all my medical needs are cared for, I agree that you never marry me either. Right? So that's their argument, that Adaita Hachi means a condition that if you had stated explicitly, the other person would have said sure, and the way you test that is if the other person said, what about you, in the same circumstance, right? And so that I think is the solution to the difference between a mummer and a husband, and the different and how you can solve the Einamatzi Olamis, because in the Gemara's case, just because you're a Shota doesn't mean you don't want emotional companionship.
Right.
Or
Okay.
physical companion.
Or physical companionship, all those things, right? You want to stay married,
Right.
right? But if you're a vegetable and all your medical needs are taken care of,
Right.
then you would be willing to say, you know what? And you don't have to stay married to me either.
Okay. I hear. One thing, okay, besides that
Sorry, that was
argument,
long.
I just also just to say on behalf of the Tzfat Beit Din, in terms of process, the process was done properly. Such for an extraordinary ruling like this, and it really is an extraordinary ruling, you need to ask Rabbanim of the first rank. So they have the agreement of Rav Zalman Chaim Goldberg, certainly of first rank, and Rav Shlomo Duchovsky also of first rank. So again, it's debatable, and I'm not, but you have to respect the process that they did. They certainly did this in a way which is a responsible way. Okay.
Okay.
If anybody wants to discuss further, I'm here.